Okay, so in this video then, what I'm going to do is just run through my initial thoughts and some problems trying to run Windows 11 ARM on my Mac Studio Ultra. And obviously to do this, I'm using Parallels. Now just to kick off here, let me just show you the spec of the machine here. So as we can see, Apple M1 Ultra, this is the 64 gig version with the 48 GPU cores. However, the RAM and the GPU core count here don't really affect anything to do with Parallels. So let me come out of there. Right, so the first thing that I'm noticing here is the setup for Parallels itself as far as the actual Windows setup is concerned. So if I go to the Control Center here and then go to the settings in Control Center. So the first thing that I wanted to do was to set the configuration for gameplay, because I very specifically initially wanted to test some games under Windows 11 here. But I'm having a problem with this immediately, because if I go to change here and I try to set it up as it were for game only, if I click on there and then click OK, it's going to come up with this error message here, or not necessarily an error, but it's coming up with this message saying the number of CPUs cannot exceed 8. Correct the value and try again. Okay, well, if I then go to the hardware here, as we can see, it is already set to automatic, and its base automatic is 4 CPU cores and 8 gigabytes of RAM, and as it says there, up to 4 gigabytes for graphics. So as it stands right now, this is in the configuration it should be in order for me to be able to switch into that game mode. So once again, in this mode here, it just won't switch to it. Nonetheless, there's a couple of other modes here that it won't switch to. Now, I've got it on software testing at the moment. That seems to be fine. Now, if I go to productivity, that's also fine. As we can see there, it just switched over. Now, if I go back to change this, so if I go into the design for CAD software and graphics editing programs, which is something that quite a lot of people will probably want to do, especially if they're using these Mac Studios and the Ultras. So let me click on there and try that. And then once again, as we can see, I'm getting this message, the number of CPUs cannot exceed 8. Correct the value and try again. And again, I'm at the base level here. Now, if I go manual, and then let me just go to 4 in manual here, and then I will go to 8 for the RAM there. So I've set all that accordingly as to what it was saying it should be set for those two setups that it won't go to. Now, if I go back, and what I will do, I will try the game mode again. So I'll click on there. Once again, we're getting that message again. And then if I go back here, obviously we're in 4 processors and 8 gigabytes. So this is exactly what it should be in order to go into that mode. And then again, if I go back, and then if I try to change and go to the design mode again, and once again, we get that error message again. Okay, so what I'm pointing out here then is, like, initially, as I've tried to test all my things that I want to do, I just can't get into the mode that I want to get into. And I'm going to assume here that this is something very specific between Parallels and these Mac Studios. Quite possibly it might be with the Ultra chips, because I've run Parallels on my MacBook M1 Max, and you know, it seems to be fine on there. There doesn't seem to be any issues trying to do what I'm trying to do here. So nonetheless, anyway, this will not do what I want it to do at this point. The only assumption that I can make here is, like I've just said, is this is something to do with the Ultra chip, and maybe Parallels just can't utilize it properly. Anyways, what I'm going to do now is just show you as well that there are other settings that we can change here to do with preferences within Parallels itself. Now, the thing is, none of these settings here are going to have any effect on those settings within the Windows setup. That won't change. So none of this stuff here is going to make any difference to that, and there's no erroring going on within that particular setup there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just dive into Windows. So let me just launch this. I'll speed through this until it gets in. Okay, so I've just launched Windows 11. So there we go. I'm on the desktop here for Windows 11. Now, immediately, there's been about 3 or 4 things that I've tried to do here. and I can't do any of them. So I'll try and briefly explain what I've tried to do, because some of what I've tried to do here is quite possibly what other people may want to do as well, and it's probably good for you to know if somebody else has already tried certain things. Anyways, first thing is, there's a bit of software here that I use. Now, this is video editing software, which you can only get on Windows. So I've tried running that here. So this is Edius by Grass Valley. Now, this won't run. It starts to launch, but then it comes across an issue. Now, that issue is very specifically AVX2. Now, the problem here is that Parallels itself doesn't either kind of virtualize or emulate AVX2. Now, I don't even know whether it's actually possible to virtualize that, because that's actually a hardware function of the processor and stuff. So yeah, anything that is running or relies upon AVX2, I doubt very much you're going to get any joy with it whatsoever. Now, whether or not this becomes something further down the line for Parallels where it can do that, because don't forget, they did actually do the TPM2 as well, and which wasn't initially available under Parallels, and that had to be done in order to run Windows 11, because that was a requirement. So yeah, maybe they can emulate or whatever certain hardware functions, but right now you cannot run anything that's AVX2, and as proof of that, that's this software here that I've got. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen if I try to launch it here, but as we'll see, it'll go through these checks and stuff for the error, and there we go, error missing AVX2. So yeah, the only thing I'm going to assume here is that nothing with AVX2 is going to be able to run. Now, the next problem that I've come across is trying to emulate Android. So I like to use some Android games and things like that. Now, there's a load of different ways you can emulate Android under Windows, but one of the most popular ones is to use BlueStacks. So as you can see here, I've been trying to install BlueStacks. Now, although this is optimized for Windows 11, obviously we're on ARM here, and although Windows 11 ARM within itself will kind of virtualize, well, actually it doesn't virtualize, it basically emulates x86 into ARM. This won't run either, so let me just try launching this. Now, the other thing as well, I actually tried to launch the 64-bit version, but that just wouldn't go anywhere near the installation. So I've kind of gone to the 32-bit version here. Then as we can see, cannot start BlueStacks, please send a problem report. Well, the thing is here, maybe you might expect that not to work, and that is quite possibly because BlueStacks is probably trying to look for an x86 version of Windows in order to install into, and obviously right now this is ARM. So maybe you could sit there and go, well, that one's a bit of a push, and maybe I would agree with that. Yeah, that's pushing it a bit too far. However, there's nothing else that I've come across so far that will emulate Android running in Windows 11 with inside the Mac here. Now, I do appreciate that there's a lot of like emulation and virtualization going on here. However, for something like an Ultra, which has got the 20 CPU cores, all these things should be doable to some degree, but so far I'm not even able to get to the point to be able to test anything, obviously because these things just are not launching. So far here we've had a bit of software that requires AVX2, which obviously won't work, and then BlueStacks won't run. Now again with BlueStacks, I'm assuming it is because this is Windows 11 ARM, and it may well be something to do with DirectX or OpenCL or something like that. And on that point, let me show you something else which is a little bit disappointing as well. Okay, so to the next problem that I'm having here, and that is to install Windows games via the Xbox Game Pass. So as we can see here, I'm in the app. Now, just before I go any further here, I've also just had another problem which has took me a little while to work out. What it is, since I last launched Windows 11 here, it would appear that Parallels has changed some of the settings without any intervention from me. And most notably, what that was the shared connection for, say, internet and Ethernet and stuff like that, or basic networking. So what's happened as I've just launched this, I didn't get any internet connection from Windows, so that obviously meant that I couldn't connect via Game Pass either. So yeah, that just took me a little while to work out. But just to be clear, I hadn't changed any of those settings within any of the setups or anything like that. So that's something that's new to me as well. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Anyways, so as far as trying to install games are concerned here with the Game Pass app and stuff, some of the games will go on, others won't. Now, I'm not entirely sure what's causing that. I'm going to hazard a guess that's something to do with particular hardware requirements and stuff, which we simply just won't have running the Mac and whatnot. Now, as an example, let me go to Halo Infinite, because this is actually a game that I'm not too bad on. So I've tried installing this. So we get to here, yeah, let's click install all. But then it's not going any further. And if I try this again, the same thing will happen. So let's install. Nope. So that will not install. But the real kind of downer here is that nothing is actually coming up to tell me why it won't install. So if I knew why it wasn't going to install, then at that point, yeah, you know, there's something that I could possibly do about it. However, let me try another game here. So let me go to an earlier version of Halo. Let me try this. Okay. Now, as we can see here, we're getting a progress indicator. Oh, and then we get an error. So there was a problem installing this game. Click here to help. Well, I've had that error on another game as well that I've tried to install, and that help doesn't help at all in any way. So the only thing that I can surmise here is that there is possibly, like, you know, certain things that are like certain hardware requirements which we just simply won't be getting with the Macs. Now, that's not really a criticism that I can make of anything here, because if it's something that's not available, it's just not available. However, it does just go to show that there's going to be a whole bunch of things that you can't run anyway, emulated or not, you know, on any Mac. That is any Mac running on Apple Silicon. So right now, I'm going to say that depending upon the particular requirements, maybe for variants of DirectX or any of the open formats, OpenCL and stuff like that, maybe those things are just going to kill it dead for anything to do with a certain amount of gameplay. However, there are certain games here that did go in, as a, for instance, I managed to get this Minecraft preview on the go here, and that did seem to run really well. So whatever this requires as far as like system resources are concerned are obviously available like within like Windows 11 ARM, then being like run through Parallels on the Mac. In fact, give me one moment. Let me just jump into this and give you an idea of how this looks. Okay, so I'm into this now. So what I'm going to do is just quickly show you some of the settings here. And I think most notably the actual graphic settings. So let me just scroll down here. Now, I'm not overly familiar with this game. I don't play it or anything. But from what I understand, this thing here, render distance, as in these chunk sizes, I think that's the main thing to do with this game, which gives it its graphical definition and stuff. And as you can see, this is on its maximum. Now, on top of that as well, I've also got anti-aliasing on the highest that it can go as well. So that does all seem to be working here. Now, if I just come back here a sec, and if I just get into the game, as it were, I would have to say that this actually looks brilliant. Again, I don't know how to play this game. It's not something that I'm familiar with, but let me just go through here. Now, graphically, that does look good. Unfortunately, it isn't running 60 frames per second. I can see all that there as I move around. You probably will be able to see that as well. At certain points, it will be hitting 60 actually, but we can see that stuff rendering off into the distance as it's redrawing and what have you. But I think for the best part, yeah, that actually probably looks really nice. I mean, anyone who's familiar with this game would know that a lot better than I would. As far as gameplay is concerned, I don't know, because it's not something that I play. But just running around here and stuff, yeah, that does look like it's good. Or let's put it this way. If I was to like have a game on here that I play, and if it looked anything like this as far as like render quality was concerned, and even the frame rate, although it's not constant 60 as we can definitely see, but if I was getting something like this out of something, say like, I don't know, one of the Halo games, I would be very happy with that. So it does show you that certain things can run as far as games are concerned, but once again, this is all going to be down to, like, various types of technologies and resources which are just not going to be available, emulated or virtualized or not, if the Mac just doesn't have it in hardware or the software ability and stuff. Anyway, let me just come out of this. Okay, so that version of Minecraft there, I think that did actually look really nice. Although, once again, I'm not a Minecraft player, so I don't know what it's meant to look like. However, from a layperson's point of view, I think the graphics did look very nice. Also, the frame rate was getting up to 60 at points there, but you could obviously see within the movement it wasn't quite hitting 60 all the time. Nonetheless, that was probably going to be, fairly decent experience for gameplay and stuff. Now, whatever it was doing, it could obviously do that because whatever resources that Minecraft needs are obviously available. Whether that's directly linked to hardware within the Mac or whether it's something being emulated or virtualized, I'm not entirely sure. But whatever it required was available. And consequently, the same goes as well here for Asphalt 9. I'm not going to start playing it, but again, that actually plays properly as well. But, things like Asphalt 9 and Minecraft, they're not great kind of like, resource hungry games or anything like that. So maybe that's the reason why they're playing. But for the best part, all the bigger titles that have been trying to load in definitely won't go in. Now, again, I'm going to surmise here, this is just down to certain things not being available. It could be down to DirectX or like OpenCL and GL and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure. To be honest, I'm not even going to bother looking into that, because if it requires too much messing around, me personally, I don't want to be getting into it. If I could just launch something and it plays and installs and plays, then that's fine. But I'm not going to go jumping through tons of hoops just to get a game to play on my Mac and stuff like that. But as you can see anyway, there's a whole bunch of problems there trying to play games and stuff. Now, this won't come as any great surprise to anyone, because obviously, since we've gone to Apple Silicon with the Macs, there's been a ton of issues trying to do gameplay and whatnot. And in all fairness, no one's buying one of these Macs for gaming. However, the reason why I'm showing this is just to show you some of the issues that I'm having, and also in case people do want to do stuff like this and maybe what they should be expecting. Anyway, let me just get out of here and go back to my desktop. Okay, so I've just had myself a cup of coffee there and I'm back onto the desktop, so I'm just going to wind this video down now. So what I've shown you here have been things which are basically problems and issues. And the reason why I'm showing you problems and issues is because they just exist. There's no way around this. You can't kind of dress this up to be anything other than what it is. So the basic problem I think here is probably Parallels itself. As we've seen before, I couldn't switch certain modes, and Parallels was thinking that I had so many CPU cores allocated that it didn't and stuff like that. Now, I'm going to assume here that this is just down to the fact that this is the Ultra chip and maybe Parallels needs a bit more updating and whatnot. And I'm fairly sure that that will happen further down the line. However, even if you get past that particular issue, we've then got the issue of the compatibility with a lot of software that just will never run. And so these things, like it's shown you before, with this Edius software, and we had the complaint of AVX2, well, that's going to stop a ton of things dead in the tracks. Then obviously I was trying to run something else here with the BlueStacks. Now, that could have been multiple problems there. That could have been 32-bit versus 64-bit issue and stuff like that. Although I'm going to hazard the guess that that was more to do with the fact that that definitely is an x86 program. Because don't forget here, Windows 11 will actually run stuff emulated within itself. So it's all well and good saying, well, you can run things virtually which will actually run quite well, because right now Windows 11 itself runs really well. But the problem is, with inside Windows, when it's running and doing what it's doing under the Mac OS and the hardware, Windows is also going to be doing a certain amount of emulation to do with x86 components. So that may well be the reason why BlueStacks was just throwing its hand in and not getting anywhere. And I would also imagine that that's going to be a lot of the problems that we will have with games as well. So obviously I only try to use the Xbox game app and stuff, but we've seen enough problems there to know that that's not going to be a viable solution for playing games and what have you. And once again, I think that will be down to just certain physical resources not being available And there might even be a thing there where there are certain physical resources which just cannot be emulated either or virtualized. So yeah, some of those issues, maybe they are there for good and they're not going to be able to be got around and stuff. Now, I do appreciate that there's going to be people out there who are thinking, well, you can run certain things which can patch things and you can get into the command lines of stuff. Well, if you want to start doing that, that's fine. But my personal opinion here is, if you're going to spend decent money on some Mac computer and then get bogged down trying to fool something into trying to do something that it really can't do, then that's entirely up to you. But for me personally, I just think it's a total waste of time, and there's better and more productive things to do with your time. Now, the one thing I will say, just to try and be positive about what's going on here, is that Windows 11 itself is running brilliantly. And I would hazard a guess here that any of the Microsoft stuff like Office Elements and stuff like that, so whether that be Word or Excel and things like that, I would imagine they're going to run great as well. And the reason why I say that is because obviously certain things to do with some of the elements of Office, they are going to be able to run on ARM natively. So there'd be none of this internal emulation of x86 and stuff going on within Windows. Now, if those things are useful to you, then yeah, I would say give this a try, because that probably is going to work really well for you. However, I would imagine that most people who are kind of looking at doing stuff like this with their Macs are going to be people who are probably doing more kind of productivity stuff and creative stuff, in which case I don't think you're going to have a very good experience with things like this. Anyway, that was just my opinion of those things. It's entirely up to you however you view these things. But the one thing that we can't ignore here is that certain things definitely will not work. And it's entirely up to you whether you want to waste a ton of time trying to make it work or see if there's workarounds. Me personally, I've got into the Mac side of things to utilize them for what they're good at. And the one thing that they're not good at is gameplay, and trying to then emulate gameplay either through Windows or through various other things that are being doing is just proven to be a massive waste of time. I'd rather just go on my Xbox Series X or my PS5 and have a much better gaming experience, which is what I would advise people to do. Just buy yourself a console. If you're on Mac, get yourself a console. Don't be worrying about Windows gaming and stuff like that. Now, I know that's going to upset a bunch of people, but the bottom line and the reality of this is that. Anyways, yeah, I think I've said enough here at the end and have shown enough things for people to make their own minds up. You either are going to agree with me or you're just going to go, well, no, that's not for me. I think I can do this a different way. And if you can, brilliant. Now, the last thing I will say, if I find any one odd outlier, as in an app or a piece of software or even a game, I will do a very single focused video about one element that may work really well. However, and if I do that, I'm definitely still going to reiterate the point that in general the process and the experience isn't very good to start off with. But to be fair, if I find the one-off thing that does work, hopefully some games, I will definitely do videos about that. Anyways, there we go then. You can take it or leave anything that I've said here, but just bear in mind the things that you've actually seen that have gone on here and then make your own conclusions. I'm David Harry. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and goodbye now.